Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the Rebel Clash stuff, go ahead and check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using the code OmniPoke. For today's video, we are taking a look at another interesting card from Darkness Ablaze. This time it's going to be the Stage 2 Decidueye archetype. It's a very simple concept this time. Decidueye has that annoying ability that just says no to GX and V Pokemon. They cannot damage Decidueye at all. So your win condition simply becomes outlasting your opponent's tech cards that are the one prize stuff, basically. And if you can get through all of their army of one prize attackers, you will win. So we have to try and work around that, really. Let's jump into the Pokemon now. As you can see, it's very simple. And you can also notice that we do have Decidueye as a pre-release card. So we do have the full English text here. Let's have a look at Decidueye in a bit more detail now. It's a 140 hit point stage 2 grass type that is weak to fire. We'll talk about some interesting fire Pokemon in a bit, which can be annoying. But we have the Deep Forest Camo ability, preventing all damage done to this Pokemon by the attacks of your opponent's V and GX Pokemon. We have the Splitting Arrow attack, which is the entire build around here. For a grass and a colorless, you do 90, and you're also able to put 20 damage on 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon. It's really nice to set up other things in the back for damage, especially when your opponent is playing a non-GX deck. There's plenty of basic Pokemon that have above 90 hit points, so being able to maybe ping them in range in the early turns can be very helpful. You're also hoping to take easier prizes on maybe some Jirachis or Galarian Zigzagoons that wind up on the bench. At the same time, you can even just have your late game option, really, where you're pinging for the entire game on something like a Crobat or another like Dedenne, something like that, and you can just pick it off with a boss later down the line. So all of these things are open to you, which is very cool. We also have 4 Rowlett and 2 Dartrix, really making the line as thick as possible because he is the main attacker here. Rowlett actually has a very important text and a pretty important role in this list as well. It's a 50 hit point grass type that has the Sky Circus ability, allowing you to ignore the energy attack cost of that Wind Pebbles attack if you use the Bird Keeper. And we are actually playing Bird Keepers in this list. It has great synergy with Stellar Wish, and it means that we can use that Wind Pebbles attack to do 60 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon for 0 energy cards if we had used that Bird Keeper. That's really when you want to try and use this, because again, similar to what I said with that 90 damage, Splitting Arrow, not really enough for even a lot of basic one prize Pokemon, but when you're doing Wind Pebbles, potentially, as an option, you can set things in range for you, which can be really, really helpful whilst you're still attaching to other Rowletts, so that you're not losing energy when your Rowletts get knocked out. So that's actually really important. Also, it means that we can be a little bit low on the old boss's orders count, hoping that if people are retreating to the bench, we still have Bird Keepers in the list to ping them back off with those Wind Pebbles later on in the game. So I really like this little Rowlett. It actually helps out a lot. It means that we can play more draw supporters in the form of Bird Keeper, rather than just having more physical Gust cards in the form of boss. So we're slightly more consistent with this little Rowlett, which is really nice. The Dartrix here does a 1 for 40. We're playing a couple of these because, of course, we're using the Turffield Stadium, which is very good for grass types. So it means that we're not completely reliant on rare candies. We want to get as many Decidueye out as possible, so the Dartrix do help out there. The 4 Jirachi really just gives us more basic Pokemon to work with, and Stellar Wish helps us against Marnies and all this other stuff in the opening turns. Usually once you've got 1 or 2 Decidueye established, you have plenty of time to get things done, but these Jirachis really do help smooth out those opening turns. And like I said, when you're playing things like Rowlett with Bird Keeper, it's really nice to have Stellar Wish for free, basically, to make those Bird Keepers stronger. For the trainers, we're playing 1 copy of Ordinary Rod to try and recycle some energy and Pokemon. Again, make your opponent go through as many Decidueye as possible is the main intention here. I'm playing 1 copy of Energy Switch. I found this to be a very neat tech card in addition to Scoop Up Net. The idea being that if you tank a hit with one of your Decidueyes, you can simply Energy Switch off of the one that's taken damage, Scoop Up Net back up the Decidueye to your hand, effectively healing it, and then you can attach for turn on that other Decidueye that you just energy switched onto. A little bit niche here, but it does make more use of those scoop up nets. That's why you're seeing a much higher count of the net than the physical switch card. So just something to bear in mind. I also like having a higher net count because you can obviously remove those Jirachis from your board, so your opponent doesn't have those easy prizes to take if they don't necessarily have an easy way around the Decidueye themselves. We also have 4 copies of Rare Candy in here. Rare Candy is going to be essential for getting your Stage 2s as quickly as possible. We want to protect our Rowletts and make them tankier, and obviously get into our main attacker, so this is huge. We're playing 3 copies of Com, as well as 3 copies of Turffield. These are really the main ways that we can get our evolutions into play, as well as Com being an additional option for the early turns. Alongside those 4 copies of Quick Ball to get our basics, we're also playing a couple captures in here to give ourselves even more access to basic Pokemon. That's one small risk we are running with this list by only playing 8 basic Pokemon. So we're trying to offset that with a high Com, high Quick Ball counts, as well as having those 2 captures that we'll talk about later. We also play 2 copies of Big Charm. I think Big Charm is actually pretty essential in this deck, to be honest, because an often used tech, especially in ADP-zation variants, is going to be Duraludon. Duraludon, with that ADP Alter Creation GX buff, is hitting exact math of 140 on a Decidueye. So having Big Charms pushing yourself out of range gives you maybe a slightly better chance there. Duraludon still is a massive pain because it has a grass resistance. They can often be playing toughness capes in their ADP lists, so it's by no means easy when you play the Big Charm, but you actually make it slightly more winnable. And even if it's not exactly for Duraludon, it can be helpful against a ton of other one-prize Pokemon like Hoopers, even Evil Admonition Hoopers, as well as the new Assault Gate Hoopers. Protecting you from like Zigzagoon pings and just offsetting that hit points is just all kinds of good. So these Big Charms have been very, very helpful overall for just making your Decidueyes that much more annoying and that much more capable of tanking hits against other one prizes to help you just win out that resource war. For the supporters, like I mentioned, I can feel like we can get away with just playing 1 copy of Boss's Orders, thanks to the Bird Keepers allowing us to have extra snipe damage in the deck, as well as the fact that Decidueye is sniping throughout the entire game anyways. We are playing 1 copy of Rosa. She's not exactly proactive, which is why I'm not playing a lot of them, but being able to take advantage of her throughout the game still is obviously handy. You can get into your Decidueyes quite easily, you can get energies, you can get rare candies, all good stuff here. We're playing 2 copies of Marnie for just some simple hand refresh, as well as disruption on the opponent's end. 3 copies of Bird Keeper, allowing us to access the Wind Pebbles attack for free, but also just giving us additional draw. And additional uses of Jirachi, or just moving out of our Jirachis into our Decidueyes, always a good deal. And we are playing 4 copies of Professor's Research as well, just a nice dump and draw 7, which can really help you get set up, which is always a good thing. For the energy, I am playing 2 copies of Weakness Guard Energy. I am obviously petrified of Volcanion, which is played in the majority of Welder decks at the moment for that Flare Starter attack. Many Fire decks choose to go second in the new era. And they are normally packing Volcanion in a 2 to 3 count in a lot of these Welder-based decks. So having those weak guards mean that you don't just get rolled by the Volcanion, because otherwise they can be huge, huge threats. We're also playing a couple copies of Capture Energy, so that we can get extra access to Rowlett as quickly as possible. You want to get multiple down most of the time, and if we have to, we can also go ahead and get Jirachi to wish towards supporters, etc. And we're still playing 7 copies of the Grass Energy. It's quite a high count of the basic energies, but I am a little bit scared of the likes of Dangerous Drill and Giratina with Scoop Up Net combinations that are still potentially viable in the next set. So still having a good chunk of basic energy and making sure that we have a steady flow of them is always going to be a good deal for me. So here is the full list. We're quite streamlined with the Pokemon, and hopefully we've got a good balance here of sort of greed with the trainers, trying to make our Decidueye a little bit more bulky, having a decent amount of healing option in here as well with the Scoop Nets, and also adding in and sort of being conscious of what techs are currently being played is really the crucial thing for the Decidueyes. And we'll talk about some tech options now. First of all, I do want to discuss the Tag Call package. I actually think it's low-key, like, kind of fine in this deck. Guzmahala being able to get you a Turffield, getting you either Weak Guard or Capture Energy, and also getting you Big Charm or potentially even the Struggle Gloves, another new tool from this set, could be pretty interesting. So I'm kind of interested in trying out this list, especially because Malolana could also provide extra healing, and playing a Sinlin in addition to the one boss would make me a little bit happier with just that one count, because you could, you know, get it again if you had to. The reason why I mentioned Struggle Gloves goes back to that point of the Volcanion. Volcanion has a base of 120 hit points, Struggle Gloves on a Decidueye does mean you can knock out a Volcanion, so hilariously, if you were to tech Struggle Gloves and Weak Guard energies, maybe that is going to be the way that you can balance out the matchup against a lot of these welder-based variants. Something to bear in mind for sure. It's something that almost made the list, but I thought was a little bit too gimmicky. If I was playing Guzhala package though, I could foresee myself playing one copy, so something to bear in mind. For Pokemon, there's a ton of other grass support you could try and play. I initially had like a 1-1 Grovyle line in this list, but I found myself pretty content with just the Turffields and the comms and stuff. But if you do want to add in Grovyle, I think a big reason why I kind of want some of the grass Pokemon in here, or Pokemon in general, is just to increase that early game basic count, so that you're not just running out of stuff in those opening turns. And especially like when you're going first, you don't have the help of being able to research or Dedenne for a chunk of cards. So you're really hoping to find early game Bull Search or a number of basic Pokemon. So that is a small concern I have. So maybe adding in like a 2-1 Grovyle line, or like a 2-1 Flapple line even, could be very reasonable. Obviously, Apple Drop gives you a bit more damage, which could be pretty cool. Again, similar to what I was saying with the Struggle Gloves, you can put some other things in range, which is pretty cool. Grovyle just giving you better search in general. Leavanny, very similar to the Big Charm concept, where you're just putting yourself that little bit more out of range. The reason why the grass stuff is obviously good to lean into is because you're already playing Turffields. It gives you great access towards those cards. But you could also try some more generic tech Pokemon like a Rangaroo or Mind Report Mewtwo. Or if you want to go for the full 4 count of Birdkeeper, you could weave in 1 or 2 copies of Starly to use that Sharp Eyes ability, attack for free once you've used a Birdkeeper, because this also shares that Sky Circus ability that the Rowlett has. And you could just, tutor out Candy Decidueyes. You could tutor out supporters. Basically, another option in addition to Jirachi, giving yourself just more basics that you can throw into the active position that aren't Rowletts, so they're just out of the line of fire. These are all things that I've definitely thought about, and at the moment I'm like ultra cautious on my energy count. I feel like you could eat into that if you really wanted to. I think my supporter count is quite generous as well for the most part. Maybe you find the energy switch isn't all that helpful, and I think the first thing I'd want to do would be increase that Pokemon count, especially the basic Pokemon count. So let me know how you've been trying that, and if you've been having success with any of these tech Pokemon. For the matchup overview, I still say that most of these fire decks are pretty ugly. Centiskorch VMAX, Welder Box, Baby Blacephalon, these are all playing, a bunch of, and even Greenzard, these are all playing, either, the Blounds themselves, which can even get over the Big Charms and get over the Weak Guard energies, or they're playing, like 2 minimum of Volcanion. Not that you can't win the game, because you do have Weak Guard in here, and it can make life a little bit more, winnable, I guess, those sorts of matchups. I think maybe even adding a 3rd copy of Weak Guard, maybe adding Struggle Gloves, those sorts of things are actually mandatory to survive in a welder-based world. Now, of course, the format is still quite wide open. We don't know exactly how strong all these welder decks are going to be. I would hedge that Blacephalon and Centiskorch are still going to be successful archetypes in this format at the very least. So it is definitely something to be aware of. Test and test and test against those Volcanions and see the best ways to try and win those matchups. ADPization I still think is very awkward. Even when you are keeping out of range of Duraludon, they can still oftentimes take easy prizes on Jirachis, on Rowletts that have to come down sometimes if they're just threatening you for other reasons. Obviously, the Duraludon is stopping you from using scoop up net shenanigans, because they can just boss and take easy prizes on Rowletts if you're just putting them back onto the bench. So it just forces a lot from you a lot of the time. And if they're also teching in Malolanas into their own list, that Duraludon is going to be super tanky and hard to deal with for sure. ADP Spiritomb, similar deal here. Once they've used that ADP GX attack, those Spiritombs can start carving through you, which could be a problem. Mewtwo Box, I've said, it can also be difficult, and again, my Mewtwo Box is playing ADP, and it's using Keldeo GX as an option, and Keldeo GX gets through all effects, so yeah, that will also be awkward. And Phalanx is a tanky one-prize Pokemon with the help of all those Vs reducing damage coming into your guys, so that could also be a headache. For the most part, my biggest concerns are just ADP and Volcanion. Those are the 2 things that I'm finding most difficult to deal with overall. Those are my closing thoughts, really. You're slightly worried about the relevance of ADPization. I still find it an excellent, excellent deck post-rotation. So maybe making making life easier against that matchup and also those welder matchups. I've tried to do it a little bit in this list, but I do think you can take those sorts of ideas further if you want to make the matchups even better for you. So you can commit more space towards those tech cards if you really want to. But yeah, overall, I think that's just the nature of this Decidueye deck. There's, times where this will be a very disruptive and awkward deck in the format. There are times where you simply have to leave it in the deck box for another tournament because there'll just be too many welder decks and too many ADP lists roaming around in the meta, and it's really down to see where the meta lands, whether or not Decidueye is going to be a high flyer or just going to be sort of waiting in the wings. 2 puns there, my apologies. But yeah, that's Decidueye, guys. Let me know what you guys think. Have you tried any of those tech cards that I had on the previous slide? What do you think about the Pokemon count, especially the basic count? It's currently my biggest concern with the list that I've put out today. But I don't find any of the tech, like basic Pokemon, so important that I need to commit spaces to them. Maybe just a few extra basics here or there to help out in general. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you enjoyed the Decidueye deck. And I will be back with another Darkness Ablaze list tomorrow. So cheers.